This is 7's Morning News, live from Adelaide.
Good morning. New restrictions have been imposed on travellers from Sydney as New South Wales grapples with a COVID outbreak. Tim Hatfield's at the airport. Tim, what's changed?
Amelia, anyone who's visited those hotspot locations in Sydney is now banned from entering South Australia, and that includes essential workers and people relocating here. The new restrictions came into force at midnight after 2 cases of community transmission were detected in Sydney earlier this week. As for anyone who's arrived before midnight, they'll need to self-isolate for 14 days and be tested on days 1, 5 and 13, and a mask has to be worn any time they come into contact with a member of the public. There are 21 locations around Sydney's east and west which are of concern, and with several flights arriving from Sydney this morning, authorities here aren't taking any chances. Other states have also ramped up restrictions to try and stop any spread beyond the New South Wales border. But Amelia, we have had some good news this morning. There have been no new cases of community transmission reported in Sydney. Back to you.
Thank you, Tim. And Adelaide Airport will be the hub of some good news later today with Qantas boss Alan Joyce in town. He's expected to make a major jobs announcement. We'll bring you the full details in our bulletins at 4 and 6. A man charged over the brutal assault of a young employee of a bubble tea shop in Chinatown is expected to front court today. Gavin Guo is accused of striking the female worker at Fun Tea in February. Video of the alleged attack in front of stunned customers went viral on social media. The 39-year-old businessman is charged with 1 count of assault. The most vulnerable Australians stranded in India will be able to fly home next week. The Prime Minister has announced the travel ban will be lifted and repatriation flights will resume on May 15, with the most urgent cases given priority. Political reporter Olivia Leeming has more from Canberra.
The first flights home from India will be reserved for some of the 900 Australians listed as vulnerable. They're among 9,000 Australians stranded in the COVID-ravaged country, desperate to come home. The first plane will leave next Saturday, May 15, the first of 3 repatriation flights this month, though Australians will still have to test negative for COVID before boarding. All flights will arrive in Darwin, with travellers to quarantine at the Howard Springs facility. Still no decision on when commercial flights from India will resume, but the Prime Minister says the government will take advice on that next week.
What we will be doing is receiving our first repatriation flight into the Northern Territory as part of the charter arrangements that we have with our airlines to bring back those first people from India at that time.
Scott Morrison has held talks with the premiers this morning for National Cabinet, asking the states to lift their caps on hotel quarantine so they too can accept flights from India. It will take months to bring home the thousands of Australians stranded there. And the Prime Minister says the government still doesn't know how many Australians in India have tested positive for COVID, as cases there surged to more than 400,000 a day.
As we've just heard, there are no new local COVID cases in New South Wales today following 24 hours of frantic testing. However, restrictions are still set to remain in place for Sydney residents. Chris Reason has more.
Yeah, good morning, Amelia. Yeah, that is a big relief for New South Wales, but of course it will also raise questions on whether the Premier Gladys Berejiklian moved too hard, too fast over just 2 cases here in the last 48 hours, with small business and particularly hospitality business reeling from the decision to impose restrictions on this Mother's Day weekend. Now, the Premier's decision came after revelations an eastern suburbs couple were carrying the same variant of the virus as a returned US traveller staying at the Park Royal Quarantine Hotel. The search is now on to find out how it leaked from the quarantine system into the community. Who is the missing link? And meanwhile, for Greater Sydney, the Central Coast and Wollongong, restrictions are in place until midnight Sunday. They include mandatory masks on public transport, inside public venues such as shopping centres, theatres and hospitals, a maximum of 20 visitors to the home, no singing in places of worship, no dancing unless it's at a wedding, and then only a maximum of 20 people. And finally, a maximum 2 visitors to aged care facilities. Again, a big problem there on Mother's Day weekend. A lot of confusion here about gyms this morning, but they're not in that list. Let's take a listen to some of what the Premier had to say this morning.
Suffice to say that we're pleased with how things are going, but the one concerning thing, which is why we imposed some of those very, very proportionate restrictions, is that there are at least one person or possibly more who've had the virus and have been out in the community that we don't know about.
The biggest border restrictions, though, of course, come from New Zealand, which has decided to pause the travel bubble with New South Wales for 48 hours. That ends tomorrow night, Saturday night, 10 p.m. Amelia.
The Therapeutic Goods Administration insists the benefits of the vaccine still outweighs the risks despite a cluster of new blood clot cases. The AstraZeneca vaccine has now been linked to 5 new cases of a rare blood clotting disorder. Nathan Templeton reports.
While most experts are still encouraging Australians to get vaccinated, that's despite 5 more people needing treatment for blood clots after having the AstraZeneca jab. The most serious case is a 66-year-old man in Townsville who has been put into intensive care. There's also a 70-year-old man from Tasmania, 2 cases in Victoria, a 51-year-old woman and a 74-year-old man, as well as a 64-year-old woman in WA. Now, despite these new cases and the TGA admitting that these conditions are almost certainly linked to getting the jab, Professor Paul Griffin, an infectious diseases expert, says the benefits of getting vaccinated still outweigh any of these risks.
That reflects an increased usage of this vaccine in that population, and so should not be cause for undue alarm at the moment. It remains a very safe and effective vaccine.
Now, all up, there have been 11 cases of blood clots reported in Australia. That's after 1.4 million doses of AstraZeneca have been administered.
Foreign Minister Marise Payne has spoken of Australia's souring relationship with China at the G7 summit in London. It comes after Beijing cut off all contact between the two governments.
The suspension of the dialogue is disappointing and it has been a valuable tool for ministers to engage, particularly in that Treasury and finance space.
The G7 summit wraps up this weekend. A truck driver has been arrested accused of fleeing the scene of a horror crash in Melbourne. Police say the 64-year-old was turning the heavy vehicle when he cut an intersection, mounted the footpath and wiped out 3 pedestrians. Tegan Dolling reports.
Well, residents say this corner has sadly been an accident waiting to happen. It was around 7 p.m. last night when a group of people standing at the South Bank intersection were hit by the B-double truck, which mounted the curb and took out the traffic light in the process. Bystanders were forced to cradle the injured and lift the traffic light off of them. The driver didn't stop, but a Good Samaritan followed him and was able to relay his number plate onto police, who found the truck 24 kilometres away and arrested the driver.
In a city's suburb like South Bank, you would know that it's pretty heavily populated with pedestrians. You would know that you would run over something and that you would at least stop. Even if infrastructure was damaged, you'd have to at least stop. And in this case, he didn't.
5 people were taken to hospital, 4 men, including a food delivery rider, and a woman. All were aged in their 20s and 30s. And 2 of those people are still in a critical condition.
The stage is set for the first showdown of the season, with Adelaide Oval ready to welcome back a capacity crowd. Let's go live to Theo Doropoulos. Theo, the anticipation's building.
Good morning, Amelia. It certainly is, of course. Both teams will be playing for the Variety Showdown Shield, which you can see over my right shoulder. Showdown 49, 24 apiece. Would you believe that? But make no mistake, Port Adelaide will go into this one as red-hot favourites. This game takes on a little bit more significance for both the players, the teams, and of course the fans. We'll touch on that in a moment. They're coming off losses both sides, so there'll be plenty of points to prove. Of course, Port Adelaide dominated the last encounter, a 75-point win. Now, this morning, both clubs put their final preparations on things at West Lakes and here at Adelaide Oval. All eyes were on Crows captain Rory Sloane. He led his side through a light run as he looks to take his place. His first game in a month, that's after eye surgery. Luke Brown and Will Hamill are also a strong chance to line up tomorrow night. As for the power, well, they'll welcome back superstar Travis Boak. He trained here at the Oval this morning. That's after missing last week with quad soreness. Now, tomorrow night will, of course, be enormous for the players, but get a load of this. For the first time since the 2019 season, a 100% seated capacity here at the Adelaide Oval. It's expected to be a sellout, meaning it'll be the most passionate rendition of Never Tear Us Apart we've heard for some time. Keep your ears peeled at Glenelg, you might even hear it down there. It's going to be amazing. In about 20 minutes' time, the coaches are going to address the media. We'll have their thoughts for Showdown 49 and all the team news coming up in our bulletins at 4 and at 6. Amelia, can't wait.
Very much looking forward to it. Thank you, Theo. A new fight has erupted around plans to relax patents on COVID-19 vaccines. Up next, concerns about what this means for vaccine shortages around the world. Plus, a missing woman has been found alive after living in a tent for 5 months in a US canyon. And Australian fashion icon Camila Frank's heartbreaking decision to protect herself from new cancers. Australian fashion icon Camila Franks has had surgery to remove her ovaries. The Caftan Queen revealed she made the heartbreaking decision to protect herself from new cancers. She's been battling breast cancer since 2018.
Hopefully I can put a close to the chapter of this journey that is breast cancer, and that I'll never stop fighting the fight.
Franks has a 3-year-old daughter, Luna. A new fight has erupted around plans to relax patents on COVID-19 vaccines after President Joe Biden added Washington's support for the plan. Critics now say it will do virtually nothing to help with the vaccine shortages around the world. Here's US correspondent Tim Lester.
President Biden today selling his plan to rebuild ageing American infrastructure, but it's his new approach to vaccine patents firing debate around the globe.
It was a statement that put people over patents.
The Biden administration now backs a plan to relax patents that currently limit who produces COVID-19 vaccines and drive vaccine production in poorer countries.
It was about leading in the world and helping producing what the world needed at a time of unprecedented crisis.
What we see now is a huge injustice. We have countries such as the US vaccinating 20-year-old healthy kids.
The pharmaceutical industry's international body argues weaker patents are the wrong answer to a problem that really requires wealthier countries do more.
All out the rich countries to share doses within the next few days or weeks, not in 4 or 5 months after we vaccinated everybody in our countries.
India's unfolding tragedy is adding urgency to the issue. Critics of the US position say relaxing patents won't suddenly ramp up production in a highly complex field.
The viral vector vaccines and the messenger RNA vaccines are really, really new, and the numbers of manufacturing sites capable of making those is really rather low.
Our manufacturing process involves more than 50,000 steps, all of which have to be executed accurately.
The patents issue is scheduled for discussion at a World Trade Organization meeting early next month. The issue's set to simmer at least until then, as the urgency to vaccinate the world grows daily. Tim Lester, 7 News.
A missing woman has been found alive after living in a tent for 5 months in a canyon in Utah in the US. The 47-year-old abandoned her camping equipment in November and survived through winter by foraging for moss and grass. Rescuers say when they found her, the woman was weak, but she's expected to make a full recovery. 2 British warships have returned to port after an English island was blockaded by French fishing boats. The fishermen are furious they've been forced to leave waters in the English Channel because of Brexit. Europe correspondent Sarah Greenhalgh has more from London.
Well, this was certainly a fairly dramatic escalation of the tensions between Britain and France. Those on land on the island of Jersey say it felt like an invasion as they watched 60 French fishing vessels arriving to blockade the port at St Helier this morning. They were protesting their post-Brexit fishing rights. Now, there was at least 1 collision between 2 of those boats, deliberate or not. There were also 4 military vessels in the vicinity. Boris Johnson had ordered 2 Navy gunboats to go down to the English Channel and monitor the situation. The French had also sent 2 of their military vessels as well. Jersey is close in physical proximity to France, just 14 miles away, but its foreign policy is governed by the UK. So under these new rules and regulations post-Brexit, French fishermen have to apply for a fishing licence. They also have to prove that they've had a history of fishing in that area. So operators who have been fishing in these waters for generations are now fearing for their livelihoods.
The new system means that the EU talks to the UK and eventually, we get crumbs of information on both sides.
After a lengthy standoff, there was somewhat of a resolution, with the French fishermen eventually retreating home. The Royal Navy vessels were called back to port, and it is now hoped that discussions between Jersey and the European Union can in some way resolve this row.
Still to come on 7's Morning News, sport with Hazy as Port and the Crows have their final training runs. Ash Barty on track to win her first Madrid Open after another dominant performance on clay. And Man United book a spot in the Europa League final despite losing to Roma this morning.
Good morning. Let's start with footy, and Crows forward Tom Lynch will miss the next 2 months after having surgery to fix an issue in his big toe. Meanwhile, the Crows and Port are set to regain star players for tomorrow's showdown at Adelaide Oval. Travis Boak got through this morning's captain's run, as did defender Ryan Burton. Rory Sloane ticked the final box in his return. Luke Brown will also make his way back into the side. We'll have the final teams in 7 News at 6 o'clock. Well, Swans CEO Tom Harley says the loss of 3 assistant coaches, including former Crows boss Don Pike, for tomorrow's clash with the Demons is a significant disruption. The team arrived in Melbourne last night without Pike, Jared McVeigh and Dean Cox because they visited a COVID hotspot.
We'll explore every opportunity to have an involvement from them, but the reality is they won't be here, so we've had to shuffle the deck chairs.
Tonight it's a grand final rematch with the Tigers favourites to beat Geelong at the MCG. Of course, it's live and free on the screens of 7. Ash Barty is on track to claim her first Madrid Open title. The world number 1 extended her clay court wins to 16 straight, cruising into the final with a 6-4-6 win over Paula Badoza. Fellow Aussie Alex de Minaur was beaten in straight sets by Austria's Dominic Thiem in the final round of 16. Rafa Nadal is through to his 15th Madrid quarter-final after downing Australian Alexei Popyrin. A moments later, the King of Clay was honoured as the Laureus World Sportsman of the Year.
Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart to the Laureus Academy.
Naomi Osaka claimed the Sportswoman of the Year. Lewis Hamilton was also honoured with his 3rd Laureus Award, becoming the first recipient of the Athlete Advocate Award. Well, Manchester United has booked its place in the Europa League final despite losing to Roma 3-2 this morning. United's 4-goal win in the first leg of the semi-final, securing an 8-5 win on aggregate. The Red Devils will face Spanish club Villarreal in the final following its 0-0 draw with Arsenal. That is our look at sport this morning. Can't wait for the showdown meals tomorrow. I need a tip from you.
Capacity crowd, home game, never tear us apart will be magnificent. Hope my dad's not watching. I'm going to say Port Adelaide.
It's a good tip.
For the medalist, who do you think?
I'm going to say hopefully Charlie Dixon kicks a bag of goals back into form and he's wearing a medal.
What about Thunder Power?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would sit with the Port Adelaide supporters.
We'll see. Okay, thanks, Hazy. It's going to be a mostly sunny day in the city today. Stay with us. I'll have all the weather details right after the break. Taking a look at the weather now, we're expecting a partly cloudy top of 22 degrees in the city today, and it's looking much the same for the rest of the state as well. Up to 26 degrees in Renmark and Port Pirie, 23 in Clare and Nuriutpa. 21's the top for Mount Gambier and Kingscote, and a possible late shower, and top of 26 for Woomera. Interstate today, partly cloudy and 26 in Brisbane. Showers and 22 in Sydney. 23 is the top for Melbourne. 21 with cloud increasing in Hobart and reaching 22 for Perth in the west. Back home, and some showers are forecast over the weekend. 20's the forecast top for Showdown tomorrow, but it'll likely cool down to 16 by the first bounce. Then 19's the forecast top on Sunday for Mother's Day, with just a possible shower, cooling down further to 17 on Monday with morning showers. 5 to 15 millimetres is possible at this stage, and then that rain should clear off by Tuesday and Wednesday. That's all the news for now. Don't miss our next bulletin at 4 o'clock. And of course, Jane will have all the day's top stories at 6. We look forward to seeing you then.